Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like the workplace has its own set of unwritten rules? A constant push and pull when it comes to teamwork, promotions, maybe even just getting that next raise.
Oh, absolutely. It can feel like a game sometimes.
Exactly. And today, we're kind of cracking the code on those hidden dynamics by diving into the fascinating world of game theory. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to understanding the strategic plays happening all around you at work.
That's a great way to put it. We've been looking at how these classic game theory scenarios, and we've even applied a sort of scoring system for workplace outcomes.
Soaring system, like points for promotions.
Yeah, exactly. Like landing a promotion might be a big score, 10, while a raise is still good, maybe a 7. And it covers the less pleasant stuff, too, like the risk of getting sidelined, or worse, that'd be a 0.
Mm.
It really helps map these abstract ideas onto our daily professional lives.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So our mission today is really to give you, the listener, a new lens, a framework, perhaps, for understanding those strategic interactions at work. And crucially, recognizing the potential outcomes based on the choices you and your colleagues might be making.
hmm
All right, let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe with a real cornerstone of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma.
Perfect starting point. The prisoner's dilemma is, well, it's fundamental, and you'd be surprised how often it pops up, maybe subtly, in the workplace. So picture two colleagues, right? They're collaborating on some key project.
Okay.
They basically have two choices. They can choose to fully cooperate, both putting their best effort, let's call that cooperate, or maybe E for our notation later,
Got it. Cooperate.
or one or both might be tempted to slack off a bit, hoping the other person carries the load. We'll call that betray, or H.
Okay, cooperate or betray H. And you mentioned points.
Yes, the points help illustrate the stakes. Let's use a simple 0 to 10 scale. 0 points means a real setback, maybe risking your position, definitely no bonus or raise.
Right. Bad outcome.
10 points, that's the jackpot, the promotion. 7 points is a really significant raise,
Mm.
and 5 points is maybe a more modest bonus or a decent, moderate raise.
Okay, 0 to 10, promotion, raises, or nothing. So what are the actual outcomes when these two colleagues choose EEK or H?
Right, there are 4 possibilities. First, if both choose to cooperate, they both contribute fully, the project's a success, and let's say they each get a high raise scoring 7 points apiece. 7 to
Right.
7. Pretty good.
Makes sense. Mutual effort, mutual reward.
But here's where the dilemma part comes in. What if you choose to cooperate, you put in the hard yards, but your partner decides to betray? Maybe they coast on your work, focus on making themselves look good.
Oh,
In that case, you could end up with 0 points. You get nothing, maybe even face some heat because your part wasn't seen as strong. Well, your partner potentially snags that promotion, a full 10 points.
0, 10.
Ouch. That really stings. Okay, what if it's the other way around? I betray, they cooperate. Yep, flip it. You betray H. Maybe you prioritize your own visible tasks over the joint effort, and your partner cooperates. You might be the one who gets the promotion 10 points because you looked efficient or claimed key successes.
And the cooperator.
Your partner, who did the heavy lifting, might get sidelined, maybe scoring 0, 10, 0.
Okay, one more scenario. What if we both decide to, well, betray HH?
If both betray, maybe there's a mistrust, poor communication, both trying to grab individual credit, the project probably suffers. You both end up with, say, just a small bonus or a moderate raise. 5 points each. 5, 5. Better than 0, but not great.
Mm. So looking at those 4 outcomes, 7, 7, 0, 10, 10, 0, and 5, 5. Clearly, the best total outcome is if both cooperate, right? 7 plus 7 is 14 points for the team, sort of.
Absolutely. That's the maximum collective payoff.
But does game theory suggest that's what usually happens? Is cooperation the stable outcome here?
Ah, that's the crux of the prisoner's dilemma. And this is where we bring in the concept of the Nash equilibrium.
Nash equilibrium. Okay.
A Nash equilibrium is a situation where neither player can improve their own outcome by changing their strategy unilaterally, assuming the other player's strategy stays the same.
Right. So you're stuck, in a way.
Exactly. And in this classic prisoner's dilemma setup, the only Nash equilibrium is when both employees choose to betray. H. H.
Both betray, even though 7, 7 is better overall. Why is that?
Think about it from your perspective. Let's say your partner cooperates. What's better for you? If you cooperate, you get 7. If you betray, you get 10. So betray is better.
Okay.
Now, what if your partner betrays H? If you cooperate, you get 0. Ouch. If you betray, you get 5. So betray is still better for you.
Gotcha. So no matter what you think the other person will do, your own best move is always to betray.
Precisely. And since the other person is presumably rational and thinking the same way, you both end up choosing betray.
Leading to the 5 outcome,
Well,
which is, well, it's stable, but it's worse for both of you than if you'd somehow managed to trust each other and cooperate for 7.
that's the trap. Individual rationality leads to a collectively suboptimal result. It really does highlight how individual incentives can sometimes undermine group success.
It certainly does. Okay, so that's the classic prisoner's dilemma in an office setting. But you mentioned the material we looked at also covers some variations on this.
It does, yeah. Things aren't always a pure prisoner's dilemma. We look at two other really relevant variations for work case dynamics. The game of chicken, sometimes called snowdrift, and the stag hunt, or assurance game.
The game of chicken. Okay, that sounds potentially more confrontational, like who blinks first?
Kind of. It can get a bit dicey, as you said.
Yeah.
So at a workplace game of chicken, imagine two colleagues again who need to get some task done. Maybe it's unpleasant, maybe it requires extra effort.
Right.
Cooperation means they share the load, they both pitch in. Betrayal, H here, means trying to avoid the task, hoping the other person will just do it to avoid disaster. Like swerving in a game of chicken.
Okay, so what's the key difference from the prisoner's dilemma, then?
The crucial difference is the outcome if both betray, HH. In the prisoner's dilemma, HH was just okay, 5, 5, 5. In the game of chicken, mutual betrayal is the worst possible outcome for both players.
Ah, okay. So if both slack off, the project completely fails.
Exactly. Disaster strikes, maybe the client is lost, the deadline is missed spectacularly, both players face serious consequences, potentially termination. So, H leads to 0-0, total failure.
Right, that definitely changes the stakes. So what are the other outcomes in this chicken game? Let's use the points again.
Okay, if both cooperate, they share the work, it gets done well, maybe they both get a good raise, let's say 7-7 again.
Still the ideal cooperation scenario.
Yep. Now, if you cooperate but your partner betrays age, they swerve, and you do the work, you ensure the task gets done so you avoid disaster, but maybe you only get a small raise, 5 points for just doing your job under duress. Your partner, who avoided the unpleasantness, might actually look better or freer for other tasks, potentially getting the promotion 10 points. So H is 5-10.
Interesting. So the cooperators still get something, unlike in the prisoner's dilemma where they could get 0.
Right. And conversely, if you betray H and your partner cooperates, you get the promotion, 10 points, for avoiding the mess, while your partner gets the small raise, 5 points, for doing the work. So HE is 10-5.
Okay, and we already established H is the disastrous 0-0.
Yeah.
So where's the Nash equilibrium here? It can't be HH, because if you think the other person is going to betray, you'd rather cooperate to get 5 instead of 0.
Exactly. You've got it. Unlike the prisoner's dilemma with its single H equilibrium, the game of chicken has 2 Nash equilibria in pure strategies.
2? Which ones?
They are the asymmetric outcomes, H, each, where you betray and your partner cooperates, and HH when you cooperate and your partner betrays.
Why are those stable?
Well, think about H. You're getting 10, your partner gets 5. If you unilaterally switch to cooperate, you get 7 instead of 10, so you wouldn't switch. If your partner unilaterally switched to betray, they'd get 0 instead of 5, so they wouldn't switch either.
Okay, so in those situations, neither person wants to change their move alone, but it feels very unstable. One person is clearly doing better than the other.
It is unstable in a different sense. It's risky.
Yeah.
You're banking on the other person swerving or cooperating while you betray. If you both try to betray simultaneously, crash. 0-0.
So the game of chicken really seems to emphasize the high risk of trying to bluff or push your luck in the workplace, especially if the cost of mutual failure is catastrophic.
Precisely. It models situations where avoiding mutual disaster is paramount, but there's still a temptation to let the other person carry the burden.
Okay, let's shift gears then. You mentioned the stag hunt or assurance game. This sounds less aggressive, maybe more about coordination.
It often is, yes. The stag hunt presents a different kind of challenge. Imagine our two colleagues again. There's a choice. They can collaborate on a really big, ambitious project. Let's call it the stag. If they succeed together, the rewards are huge, maybe a major promotion for both. That's cooperate.
Hunting the stag. High risk, high reward.
Exactly. Or they could play it safer. They could each independently work on smaller, guaranteed tasks. Let's call them rabbits. This guarantees a smaller but certain individual payoff, like a moderate raise. This is the betray option, H, in this context, though defect or go it alone might be better terms.
Okay, so cooperate for the big stag, betray H for the small rabbits.
Yeah.
What are the point outcomes here?
Right. If both cooperate and successfully hunt the stag, they both get the big prize major promotion, 10 points each. 10, 10. The best possible outcome.
The ideal collaboration.
Now, if you commit to the stag, putting in all that effort, but your partner decides to chase rabbits instead, well, you can't catch a stag alone. Your effort is wasted. You get nothing. 0 points. Your partner, however, gets their guaranteed small raise from their rabbit, 5 points. So AJH is 0.
Oh, wow. So cooperating is risky if you can't trust your partner.
Very risky. And the reverse is also true. If you play it safe with rabbits and your partner tries for the stag, you get your small raise, 5 points, but your partner feels alone and gets nothing, 0 points.
Yeah.
So HA is 5-0.
Okay. And what if both decide to just play it safe? Both chase rabbits, H?
If both betray HH, they both ignore the ambitious stag project and just complete their individual tasks. They each get their moderate safe raise, 5 points each. 5, 5.
So looking at these, 10, 10, 0, 5, 0, 5, 5. Again, the best outcome is clearly 10, 10, mutual cooperation on the stag. What are the Nash equilibria here?
This is where the stag hunt gets really interesting. It actually has 2 Nash equilibria similar to chicken, but with very different implications.
Okay.
One Nash equilibrium is indeed both cooperate on the stag. If you're both cooperating, neither wants to switch to hunting rabbits alone because they go from 10 points down to 5. This is called the payoff dominant equilibrium because it offers the highest total reward.
That makes sense. The best outcome is stable if you can get there. What's the other one?
The other Nash equilibrium is HH. Both betray and hunt rabbits. If you're both hunting rabbits, neither wants to unilaterally switch to hunting the stag because they go from 5 points down to 0 since the other person is still hunting rabbits. This is called the risk-dominant equilibrium.
Risk-dominant. Why?
Because it's the safer bet. Choosing H rabbits guarantees you at least 5 points, regardless of what your partner does. Choosing H stag is potentially much better, 10 points, but it carries the risk of getting HE if your partner doesn't cooperate. So, HH minimizes your potential losses.
Ah, I see. So the stag hunt really captures that tension between ambition and security, between trust and caution in collaboration.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of assurance and trust. To achieve the best outcome, you need confidence that your partner will also choose EA. Without that trust, the safer risk-dominant option, HH, becomes much more attractive, even though it leads to a lower reward for everyone.
That feels very relevant to deciding whether to join those big cross-functional projects or just stick to your own knitting, so to speak.
Precisely. The perceived trustworthiness of your colleagues and the overall company culture regarding collaboration versus individual achievement heavily influences whether people aim for stags or settle for rabbits.
Okay, this is great. Prisoner's dilemma, chicken, stag hunt. Any other scenarios from the sources we should touch on?
There was one more that adds another interesting twist. The volunteer's dilemma.
The volunteer's dilemma, right. I think almost everyone has felt that moment at work. Should I step up for this annoying task or hope someone else does?
That's exactly the setup. Imagine there's a necessary but maybe difficult or time-consuming task that needs doing. It benefits the team or company if someone does it, but it's costly for the individual who volunteers.
Like dealing with a difficult client or putting in extra hours on short notice.
Perfect examples. So 2 employees are aware of this need. They can choose to volunteer, G for go the extra mile, or avoid it and stick to their regular duties, K for keep to regular hours.
G or K. Okay, what are the points here? Again, thinking about raises or promotions.
Let's assign some points. If both volunteer, G, they share the burden, the task gets done, and maybe they both get recognized with moderate raises, say 6 points each. 6, 6.
Okay, shared effort, moderate reward.
Now, if you volunteer, G, but your partner keeps to regular hours, K, you do the work. You get the moderate raise, 6 points. But your partner benefits from the task being done without doing the extra work. They might even look better because they weren't bogged down, maybe getting a higher raise or contributing to a promotion case. Let's give them 8 points. So GK is 6, 8.
So the volunteer gets less than the non-volunteer in that case.
In this setup, yes. The non-volunteer benefits from the public good provided by the volunteer without paying the cost. And conversely, if you keep to regular hours, K, and your partner volunteers, you get the higher reward, 8 points, while your partner gets a moderate 6 points for doing the work. So KG is 8, 6.
Okay, and the final case? Neither volunteers. KK.
If neither volunteers, KK, the necessary task doesn't get done. This likely has negative consequences for the team or project, maybe reflecting poorly on both employees. So no rewards, 0 points for both. 0, 0.
Right. That's a really tricky setup. It seems like your best outcome is always if the other person volunteers, giving you 8 points. But if they don't, you'd rather volunteer yourself 6 points than end up with 0.
Precisely. You've hit the strategic core. If you think your colleague is likely to avoid K, then volunteering G is better for you, 6 sequent. But if you think your colleague is likely to volunteer G, then avoiding K is better for you, 8-6.
So is there a stable outcome? A Nash equilibrium like in the other games? Where does it settle?
This is the really interesting part of the volunteer's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
In this structure, there's no pure strategy, Nash equilibrium.
No pure strategy, meaning like always volunteering or always avoiding isn't stable.
Exactly. Think about it. If the established pattern was, GG, everyone always volunteers, someone would be tempted to start avoiding K to try and get 8 points instead of 6.
Right.
And if the pattern was, KK, everyone always avoids the inger, then someone would have a strong incentive to start volunteering, G, to get 6 points instead of 0.
So it's inherently unstable if everyone does the same thing.
Correct. Neither GG nor KK is stable in the Nash sense. You always have an incentive to deviate if you know what the other person is doing.
So how does this resolve then? Does everyone just flip coins?
Sort of. Game theory suggests it resolves with a mixed strategy equilibrium. Players choose randomly between volunteering and avoiding, with a certain probability.
Probability.
Yeah. Based on the payoffs we assigned, 6, 8, 0, the theory calculates the probability that makes each player indifferent between volunteering and avoiding, because their expected payoff is the same either way. In our specific example, it turns out each player would rationally choose to volunteer G about 75% of the time and avoid K 25% of the time.
75%. Wow. So most of the time someone volunteers, but there's always that chance that nobody does, or that you volunteer when you didn't strictly need to.
Exactly. It leads to this probabilistic outcome where the necessary task usually gets done, but not always, and the burden isn't always shared optimally.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit of ground here. The prisoner's dilemma, game of chicken, stag hunt, and volunteer's dilemma, all through the lens of workplace interactions. Could we maybe do a quick recap of the core takeaways from each?
Absolutely. Let's try and distill it.
Yeah.
Prisoner's dilemma. The big takeaway is how individual self-interest, even when rational, can lead everyone to a worse outcome, betray, than if they'd cooperated. It shows the challenge of achieving trust.
Right, the trap of mistrust.
Game of chicken. This one highlights situations where mutual defection or betrayal is catastrophic, like HEH leading to 0-0. It's about brinkmanship, risk, and the danger of both sides trying to force the other to yield. The stable points are asymmetric. One cooperates, one betrays.
High stakes, nerve-wracking.
Stag hunt. This illustrates the trade-off between high reward, high trust collaborative outcome, if you agree, and a safer, lower reward individualistic outcome, HH. It really emphasizes the role of assurance and shared confidence for ambitious goals. You have two potential stable points, one better but riskier.
Ambition versus security. Trust is key.
And finally, the volunteer's dilemma. This shows situations where everyone benefits if someone takes a hit for the team, but the individual incentive is to hope someone else does it. There's no stable, always do this strategy leading to that mixed probabilistic outcome.
The free rider problem, essentially.
In a sense, yes, or the diffusion of responsibility.
You also mentioned earlier that these games have different reward-risk profiles. What does that mean practically for someone navigating their career?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Each scenario presents a different kind of gamble, if you will. How much potential reward are you chasing versus how much risk are you willing to take on? And crucially, how much does your outcome depend on the unpredictable actions of others?
So understanding which game you might be in helps you assess those risks.
Exactly. In the stag hunt, going for the stag has a huge potential upside, but also a significant risk of getting 0. Playing it safe with rabbits, H, limits your upside but protects your downside. The prisoner's dilemma often pushes you towards a safer but mediocre outcome, H. Chicken forces you to consider the potentially disastrous downside of mutual betrayal, H.
And you mentioned things like company culture influencing this.
Hugely important. Is your workplace environment one that fosters trust and rewards genuine collaboration, making the stag hunts more likely? Or is it highly competitive, maybe even cutthroat, pushing people towards the prisoner's dilemma's H equilibrium?
And whether you'll work with these people again?
Critical. These are often presented as one-shot games, but in reality, Workplace interactions are repeated. If you betray someone today in a prisoner's dilemma, they're probably less likely to cooperate with you tomorrow. Reputation matters. The possibility of future interactions can stabilize cooperation even when the one-shot incentive is to betray. Strategies like tit for tat emerge in repeated games.
Right. The shadow of the future, as they say.
Precisely. The long-term consequences can definitely outweigh short-term gains from defection.
This has been incredibly insightful. It really does provide a powerful framework for thinking about all those subtle and sometimes not so subtle strategic interactions we face every day at work. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the sort of main message you hope listeners take away?
I think the core message is that understanding these fundamental game theory concepts isn't just academic, it gives you a practical toolkit. By learning to recognize the characteristics of these different games, the incentives, the payoffs, the risks, the role of trust, you can become much more aware, more intentional about your own strategic choices.
So it helps you anticipate consequences and make better decisions.
Yeah, hopefully. It helps you analyze situations, understand why people might be behaving the way they are, and think more clearly about how your actions in terms of teamwork, competition, negotiation might play out for your career. It's about strategic awareness.
That's a fantastic takeaway. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over. Armed with this understanding of the prisoner's dilemma, the high-stakes game of chicken, the collaborative potential of the stag hunt, and that tricky volunteer's dilemma, how might recognizing which game you're playing influence your approach? How might it change how you handle teamwork, navigate competition, or make those crucial career decisions going forward?
And maybe ask yourself, which of these games feels most like your typical workplace environment right now?
That's a really powerful question. Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.